to me, and it was actually, kind of funny that my economics professors really couldn't answer a lot of my questions, but this gynecologist who was running for president could. So it really led to me being, really passionate about helping develop a better economic and financial future for my generation and those that will come after me. So I moved to Washington to work on Capitol Hill. And I worked for my congressman, Dennis Ross, who represents the 15th District of Florida. And I spent, a lot of time following Dr. Paul's work on the Hill and had the opportunity to meet him. In fact, behind me, you're in my office here, that's a photo of Dr. Paul right there. And he was really my inspiration and why I got started. So it was kind of this, issue of really being upset about what was happening in the economy that led me to Washington, D.C. to work in public policy. And through that work, I learned about Bitcoin. So I worked on the legislation, the Jobs Act, which is the rules for what became the rules for crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending, which was something I thought was really exciting and really opened up a lot for entrepreneurs and younger stage investors. Digital currency did not end up making it into that bill, but we were briefed on that bill during the negotiations. I led those negotiations for my office. So the moment I heard about there's this currency that is not controlled by the government or any company or corporation, to me, that was just very interesting as someone interested in economic policy. So I began studying this industry and following it very closely for several years. And as someone living and working in DC, I was very much following the policy updates that were happening in the industry. So 2013 was a pretty big year for Bitcoin. That year was the year that Cyprus went through their bailout and all these Cypriots started buying Bitcoin because they weren't really sure if Cyprus was going to leave the euro or not. So there was a lot of economic instability. And that was when Bitcoin really hit the national or international news wires. And that was also when the price of Bitcoin spiked up 3,000%. So when I first got in, the price was $10, $12, $13. And that year of 2013 is when the price shot up to over I think it hit 12 or 1,500. But there were also some not so great things that happened. So that was also when Mt. Gox happened. So the exchange in Japan, where there was over $500 million of customer money that went missing, gone, lost. And then there was also a lot of high-profile media attention around Silk Road. So people using Bitcoin to buy illegal drugs online. Not great in terms of the PR for this industry. And again, as someone living and working in DC, I really saw how that could impact an industry. So that same year, there was a senator, Joe Manchin, he called for a ban on Bitcoin. Not great. There was also a number of regulators who started issuing warnings about how dangerous Bitcoin is. And then we started seeing the regulators regulate. So we saw FinCEN, who is the money laundering regulator, put out their guidance that defined virtual currency as virtual currency exchangers as money transmitters. So that's how these state-by-state regimes originally got pushed into place. So it was really obvious to me as a policy expert living and working in DC that there was really a void in Washington in terms of there really wasn't anyone here that could advocate on behalf of the industry, that could go to Congress and say banning Bitcoin is not a good idea for this and that, or it's not really going to accomplish anything because the majority of illegal drugs are actually being purchased with cash, not a traceable digital currency. And also going to law enforcement, and if they have questions or concerns, answering their questions and being a resource for them. So there was a really big opportunity for us, and that's what we set out to do. So we launched in July of 2014. We're now the largest association in the world that's representing the blockchain industry. We are a nonprofit. We represent over 130 companies, including Bloq, which Jordan is a member and a team member of. We're helping our members, one, navigate through the treacherous regulatory waters, but also ensuring that regulators don't come in heavy-handed and regulate this out of existence. Make sure that our companies have the opportunity to go to market and that the compliance burdens are not so high that they can't get started. So that's kind of the overview of how I got started and kind of a high level of what we do.
Great, yeah, I definitely think that's a reason why Bitcoin is so interesting. It's sort of the intersection of economics, computer science, data science, and all of these different fields. And I don't think that it's a coincidence that it came out around the same time as the financial crisis of 2008. I think that it was definitely driven that way. So we got a wonderful background from Perianne, but let's hear about Jordan as well. So Jordan, please fill us in about what you do at Bloq and your general background, please.
Great, yeah, so similar to Perianne, I am a cheerleader. So my father went to UF, and I think that just about every family member has gone to UF. So I was there, I was fortunate enough to be there with 5 cousins. So I grew up going to Gator games, and very different as far as how I got started in it. So my background is in biological sciences. At UF, I majored in animal biology, and then I went to Georgetown and got my master's in bioinformatics. So if you aren't familiar with bioinformatics, that's basically data science for biological sciences, so biochemistry and molecular biology. While I was there, I also spent quite a bit of time studying medical informatics, which is dealing more with the information technology for medical records and just the healthcare industry. And this was around the same time that the medical field was adopting electronic health records. And so I spent a lot of time really researching the problems with electronic health records as far as when they were first implemented and the standardization and how difficult it can be for, you can go to one doctor and they have one electronic health record, and then you go to another doctor, they have an electronic health record, and these two don't speak to one another. And so during this time, I was also really digging into my computer science, and I was in an algorithms course, and as a fun reading assignment, we talked about Bitcoin. And so I learned about Bitcoin, I guess this was late 2012, early 2013, and I really saw the potential for the digital currency, and I wanted to do as much as I could at the time. I was in grad school, so $20 was extremely valuable to me, so I couldn't and really wish I would have invested, but I didn't. But instead, I did as many side projects as I could. And so I did this, and then as the technology and as blockchain kind of evolved, I saw the crossroads between what I had studied with the electronic health records and blockchain, and that was really when I when I wanted to devote my time to it, because I saw how we could really do more for data sharing and the potential beyond just digital currency. And so that was how I really started with blockchain technology, and then I joined Bloq in February of 2016, so almost 2 years ago now. And I joined as a data scientist, and now I am Director of Research and Operations there. In addition to that, I also am a research fellow at the Chamber.
Awesome. Okay. So can you tell us, Jordan, could you tell us sort of a typical what you would do on a day-to-day at Bloq?
Yeah, so my day-to-day, I wear many hats. So I can do everything from project management, to do some marketing. So I also will, since I do a lot with the engineering team, I also am kind of the first person that candidates will talk to, and so I take the lead on the hiring process as well. But for a lot of the projects, and I will lead those. So I talk to customers and really try to dig deeper into what their needs are or what they're looking for with blockchain technology.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So if we could also hear from Perianne, sort of, if there's a typical day for you, what sort of things are you doing as the president of the Chamber of Digital Commerce? I mean, you gave us a background about what you do there, or what the general purpose is of the Chamber of Digital Commerce, but is there anything that you're doing, such as presenting to senators and trying to, or is it more focused on the regulatory and trying to facilitate the laws that are being written today?
So it's hard to say what a typical day for me looks like, because this job has taken me far and wide. There's a lot of people who want to know about Bitcoin and blockchain. There's a lot of people who have demand to understand it, and oftentimes we play that role. There's a couple different, ways in which you could look at our operations. So one, we have a member services department. So we have over 130 member companies. So that's a lot of individual people, hundreds, if not 1,000 individuals who are participating in our platform. So we have a number of working groups for our members. A couple, I'll quickly mention would be our Smart Contracts Alliance. So I don't know if you guys have talked about smart contracts in the club yet, but this idea of automating a transaction, there's certainly some legal kind of ramifications and questions companies have. So like a lot of banks and financial institutions are looking at smart contracts for trading purposes. Insurance companies are looking at it for claims processing. So you're moving money, right? That's a highly regulated industry. So there's a lot of policy questions underway. Is code considered a contract? Are these legally binding? Those are some of the issues we're working on. So members can participate in the working groups like the Smart Contracts Alliance. We just 2 weeks ago launched a Token Alliance. So that's working with companies that are issuing ICOs, putting together best practices, a self-regulatory framework. Right now, where there's really an absence of clear kind of guidance from the SEC on how to do this in a way that meets either inside or outside the jurisdiction of the SEC. So we're helping the industry navigate that. Kind of depending on what your activities are, we have different initiatives companies may participate in. But then we also serve as a resource to the members, and then we also serve as a resource to the industry itself. The policy community. So a lot of time explaining Bitcoin and blockchain to members of Congress, regulators. I was just kind of pulling up my schedule just so you can understand how crazy busy we are. So 2 weeks ago, I was in the United Arab Emirates. So we led the first ever trade mission, sponsored by any government in the world ever. It was the US government that sponsored this. We took a team of 10 companies to the UAE. We were hosted by the US ambassador to the UAE, Barbara A. Leaf, and her team set up and organized a number of meetings for us throughout the country. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but the Dubai government, their king, has claimed that the Dubai government will be completely blockchain enabled by the year 2020. So it's the most aggressive blockchain strategy in the world. So we were out there talking about his vision and bringing a handful of US-based companies that can help support the king with enabling his government, which was very exciting. So last week that was 2 weeks ago, going all over the UAE. And then this past week I was in Washington, D.C. And so, our meetings ranged from meeting with, a member of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System. So I met with one of the Fed governors last week, which is actually an exciting opportunity for me. Given that we had just come back from this trade mission, I met with the Commerce Secretary, Wilbur Ross. to kind of follow up on what happened overseas on our trade mission. We're also working on a tax strategy, so meeting with some of the main tax advocates and other policy organizations that are much older and much more established. So, playing the role in terms of navigating the landscape here in Washington and serving as a resource to the policy community.
Yeah. Okay, so obviously she's a very busy woman. I was wondering, sort of, Jordan, what you do as a research fellow with the Chamber of Digital Commerce, because, I mean, obviously you have your own full-time job, so is this sort of more of a technical explanation role, or what sort of things do you do as a research fellow there?
Yeah, I think that's probably the best explanation. So in DC, most of the conversations around blockchain aren't necessarily going to be focused on the nitty-gritty details of the technology, but there are definitely times that the chamber needs somebody who can come in and they can talk more about the technology, whether that's a deeper level or just a high level overview. So that's where I can come in and I can either answer questions or provide more of the overview or briefing of this.
Okay, great. So here's an interesting question. We see that there's a lot of different, because of the legal ambiguity around blockchain space, there are different sort of scams that can pop up. And I'm sort of posing this to both of you, but is there any sort of beneficial regulation that you see for blockchain technology? Just to start, I guess, Perianne, if you could.
And then I'm focused on policy. I'll work at that. We certainly don't advocate for new regulation. We're really more interested in, I feel like a lot of our efforts have been keeping new laws coming in to regulate the space. We very much are in line with, right now we're kind of reviewing the Clinton internet strategy, which during the early days of the internet, there was a moratorium for the internet, where there was this period of time where the government decided we will not pass any new laws or regulations regulating the internet because we want it to grow and we're not sure what it's going to turn into, and we don't want to come in and try to call it something before it has the opportunity to develop. So that's kind of the ethos we have. However, this is a little bit different than the internet in that blockchain has been called the internet of value. So it's not, it's different in that the internet, has very much been used to share data and information, where the blockchain is more focused on sharing value, money, assets. So the industry of money is probably the most highly regulated activity in the world. Movement of money is something that concerns regulators and law enforcement and all the powers that be. So there are very small, narrow ways in which regulation has actually been beneficial. So I mentioned FinCEN, who regulates money laundering. That was the first regulator in the world that issued anything formal around Bitcoin. And what they put out in 2013 is they said, convertible virtual currency is what's considered a money service business, or an MSB. So, and that made virtual currency exchangers subject to the money transmitter licenses. So money transmitters are the exact same thing as like Western Union, MoneyGram, anywhere where you're going to exchange money. So the traditional model was, either you're traveling or you're remitting money to your family overseas. So people physically go in, hand them US dollars for cash and exchange it for euros. Or they'll send their US dollars to pesos to the Western Union in Mexico, and their family will come in and receive those funds. So in the virtual currency space, money transmitters are a little bit different in that, one, there's no paper fiat, there's no paper medium involved. You're going out of think about it as your on-ramp. So if you want to buy Bitcoin or Ether, or name your favorite currency, you have to go to a exchange, and you would exchange your US dollars for Bitcoin or whatever. That activity is very regulated, and so companies like Coinbase that offer these services have to hold what's called a money transmitter license. It's a complete disaster. I don't recommend going down this path. But there has been areas in which it has been beneficial to better define what a money transmitter license would look like for companies to help them obtain those licenses so they can offer these services. But I guess to generally answer your question, not really. If regulation adds more clarity to the industry to be able to grow and enter and offer their products and services to the market, yes, but that's not something that that's not really the way in which we approach policy.
Okay, all right. So sort of on the topic of money laundering, and on that topic, basically last summer what we saw was one of the heads of BTCE, which was a Bitcoin exchange, basically was money laundering some of the funds that were stolen from Mt. Gox, which was a very popular exchange in 2013. Perianne touched on it in her intro a bit, but it sort of crashed the price, and it was pretty detrimental for Bitcoin. But they were able to track the blockchain back. Private firms were able to look at the blockchain and sort of track down who this person was that was laundering these funds. And so with this, I'm sort of wondering if the transparency of Bitcoin sort of has any negative externalities on the users, specifically for Jordan from a data science perspective. If we're looking at just a public ledger and we can sort of track, with enough research, we can sort of track individuals, how does that affect the individual and their privacy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are definitely benefits, especially from the law enforcement side, as we just went through that example. But something to remember, and something that I do want to get into right now, is more of the digital ID. We're talking about putting a lot of personal identifying information and having that in some way with the blockchain. And I think that something we need to remember is you don't have to have this data on the blockchain. It is possible to have it off-chain and have the blockchain basically point to this data. And I think that if we're talking about extremely sensitive information like that, the best approach is to have it off-chain and not store that on-chain.
Okay, so you would not be a proponent for on-chain scaling, sort of like the dream that people have about, or that some people have about purchasing coffee with Bitcoin. You believe that sort of can be moved off-chain. Is that correct?
I think that there are probably arguments both ways. But when we're talking about more of the personally identifying information, the more the information that we don't want exposed. So if you don't want it exposed, or if you want to keep it secure, then that's the information that I think should be kept off-chain. If we're talking about more transactions, then I think that, I kind of, as a data scientist, I think that we always need to be thinking ahead, but we obviously see that, so the criminals are definitely trying to get smarter, and we just have to stay one step ahead. I guess that makes sense when we are thinking about it from the law enforcement side. But I don't really think that there are necessarily bad use cases from that sense. Beneficial.
Okay, all right. So sort of jumping topics from the data science aspect and this transparency, and sort of jumping more into economics, do you think, this is a question for both of you as well, do you think that the hoarding of Bitcoin and these other tokens sort of has a negative effect on the adoption as a legitimate currency? And I guess we'll start with Perianne from her economics background.
I'm so glad you asked this question because I actually was looking up hoarding statistics last night. So the reason why, a big reason why people hoard, and we've talked to some of the largest companies that would provide these types of storage services to the industry, has a lot to do with the tax. So IRS, who we all love, I know, has determined that, I see you all laughing, that they call it convertible virtual currency will be taxed as property. So I guess to kind of give you a little bit of a policy perspective here, the IRS is a division within the U.S. Treasury. If you remember earlier, I was talking about FinCEN, the money laundering regulator. They're another division within Treasury. So in 2013, FinCEN came out and they called this asset a convertible virtual currency, but they regulate it as currency, and that's what pushed it into the money transmitter regime. And then a year later, several months later in 2014, IRS came out and said, oh yeah, that convertible virtual currency stuff, we're going to call it property and we're going to tax it as property. So you have two different offices within the same department calling it two completely different things. This is why it's important to have someone like the chamber here who can say, did you guys talk to each other at all? After meeting with both these, this all happened before the chamber existed, by the way. But after spending quite a bit of time working in this space, it's pretty obvious that they didn't talk to each other. I don't even know if they realized that one office was doing one and the other was doing something else. So the IRS has called it property, which means you're subject to capital gains, which pretty much makes it impossible to fluctuate as a currency in the market. Because it doesn't make sense for a consumer to buy a cup of coffee. I mean, it's just the administrative logistics of tracking that is pretty much impossible. So this is what we call competing currencies. Our position at the chamber is that in a free country, people, Americans, should be able to choose whatever they want as currency, whether it's something sponsored by the U.S. government, or the Federal Reserve, like the US dollar, or a Federal Reserve note, or it's gold, or silver, or I don't know, salt, whatever. We should be able to use whatever we want. But the reason why nothing else is really used as a currency here is because of that capital gains tax. So it's our position that capital gains and investment taxes should be exempted that convertible virtual currencies such as Bitcoin and other blockchain-enabled cryptocurrencies should be exempted from the capital gain and investment taxes. And that, we believe, would help with this issue you call hoarding. So is it a problem that people are hoarding? Well, I don't feel like, people, consumers, do what's best for them, right? They do what's in their best interest. And right now, holding on to your gains seems to be better than paying these astronomical taxes on cups of coffee and whatever else. So really the issue is a policy issue. It's not necessarily a people issue. If we can get the tax strategy right, that would open up a huge amount of economic activity. So that's one thing that we're working on and we're fighting for here in DC.
So I would just add, definitely a tax issue, at least for me, is this is coming more from personal experience. So the tax issue is definitely a big concern for me. And then the other thing that I find now is that I find myself holding on to at least Bitcoin a lot more than I used to because I would send it back and forth pretty regularly. And I hold on to it more because of the fees that they're expecting an increase in the fees, so I don't send it necessarily back and forth between friends as I used to. And so I will maybe, instead of sending the transaction every day, I will wait until the end of the week and then send a transaction. So for instance, I used to send money back and forth to my husband, basically like PayPal. Now we basically just fold all together and add up our transactions, and then we send it over, or we do one big transaction and then so I think that is another thing that may be contributing. But I will say that I think that there's room for everyone where, people who may see it as an investment vehicle right now may in the future view it more as cash. And so we'll see. I think that the ecosystem is still very much evolving.
All right, great. So at this point in time, I think we want to open up the floor for questions from the audience. If anybody has any questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this laptop here, and then you can walk up to the stool here and just talk into the mic so that they can hear your question, and you can talk with them personally. So let me get set up there. Perfect. Yeah. Alrighty. So, I know Brandon had some questions.
Yeah.
All right. So, here we go. All right.
Don't forget to mute up. To mute.
Yeah. Okay, so make sure to mute after you give your question so that we can hear their response.
Okay, so mute after I get the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm muted right now.
Yes, you're muted right now. Okay, so just for everybody, just come up here if you have a question that you want to ask. You can come up here, unmute the mic, and then we'll unmute up here so that we can hear their response as well. So yeah, perfect. So let's go.
All right, cool. So one of the things I was, that I really liked that Perianne supports is, given your experience with Bitcoin and over a long period of time, the different growth and the need for something like self-regulation for a lot of the, say, like smart contract ICOs that seem to be what I might say, in my opinion, could be cancerous on the Bitcoin ecosystem. But still regulating and helping, the U.S. use this technology. The thought that crosses my mind is there's other countries in the world like Russia and, like you said, the UAE, China, a lot of these other countries that are integrating their own national currencies. One of the positions that I think the U.S. should be taking is, deregulating these as much as possible so that the U.S. can be a viable contender in the, in the world market now for cryptocurrencies, where if it continues to take a harsh stance on, say, taxation and regulation, other countries like China and Russia will take the stage for, global economics. Any thoughts on kind of improving that?
All right. Perfect.
Yeah, I think your thinking is exactly right. And one of the things that keeps me up at night is, if the U.S. does not come up with a strategy to welcome blockchain and this technology into this country, you're absolutely right. We'll see global receipts. In fact, we're already seeing that. We have a number of members at the chamber. As mentioned, we have over 130 companies that are members, and we have some startups where the company is founded by Americans. The investors are American investors, but they couldn't get the licenses they needed to operate here, so they had to take their companies overseas to get started. Part of that is because it's really expensive to get these licenses, and it's just really not possible to do that on a startup budget. So they're going overseas, opening up their operations, bringing in some revenue, getting some traction, and then using that success in a smaller country and bringing that into the United States to be able to enter the markets here. I don't think that's a great strategy for the U.S. The majority of economic activity comes from small businesses. So we really should be finding ways to welcome entrepreneurs and startups here, and we haven't done a great job with that. And then look, I've dedicated my entire career in life to this industry. I fully believe that this is the most important technology I will ever see in my entire life, and that's why I work in this space full time. And I've set up a nonprofit to support this industry. And if this technology is everything I believe it's going to be, whatever country gets their blockchain strategy right is going to benefit significantly from that. So that could lead to the next Silicon Valley being somewhere else. And we're seeing these huge crypto hubs develop all over the world. So you have Crypto Valley and Zug. There's quite a bit of activity in Russia. You're right about that. China, there's a huge amount of activity coming out of China. I mean, look, the government of the UAE invited us to go overseas to work with governments in other countries on this technology. And since the news got out that we did this trade mission, we've been invited to now go to Australia, Brazil, China, a whole bunch of other jurisdictions. So, you're right. If the U.S. doesn't get this correct and another country figures that out, it could lead to brain drain, it could lead to capital flight, and it could lead to the United States' position as the financial powerhouse on the global stage diminished.
Perfect. Okay. I think Robbie also had a question that you wanted to ask.
So, am I good?
Yeah.
Okay. So my question was a general one. Obviously, you guys both know about in the middle of November, the next hard fork, 2x versus non-2x. I just honestly was wondering your thoughts about that. If there was a scenario where they could coexist, if they could both be utilized in what their respective fields, like what they're both known for being good at. Also, there's been talk about some mining pools pulling out of the New York agreement, like they said they would, and if that's going to affect the 2x implementation. I'm not what is your thoughts on that, and just your overall opinion on the scalability? Which one you think is going to succeed overall, and which one is the real Bitcoin? Because there's debate. Thank you.
You can say if you want.
I'll go back. It's fine.
We've already New York agreement, so that is where my support is right now.
I didn't hear what.
I didn't hear.
I didn't hear that.
She said she agrees with the New York agreement.
Oh, okay. She agrees with the New York agreement.
Yeah.
This is a Jordan question. So we, at the Chamber, try our best to stay technology agnostic and stay out of these technical debates. We're policy experts, we're not technology experts. So we lean to Jordan and our members to really oversee these types of technology developments. And the other thing, I very much support what I would consider free market economics, and I don't necessarily believe that there's only one solution or one blockchain that's going to be the mega chain over time. I think there's going to be a lot of different technologies out there that meet a lot of different businesses' wants and needs, and that's something that is yet to be determined.
Yeah, and I will also just add in that right now, and for the past several years, there's been a lot of political divide in the ecosystem, or in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I think that be able to come together and move forward, and so I think that this is a way for us to move forward with the scaling debate.
What? She said that she supported the New York agreement at first.
Okay, I just didn't catch what she said.
Okay. Perfect. All right. So, does anybody else have any other questions that you'd like to ask, or you'd like to come on down here and ask?
Yeah, we're just come down here.
Perfect.
So should I?
All right.
So, how do you think the release of the crypto rubles are going to affect Russia internally as well as the rest of the world? Because, they're issuing their own national digital currency now. So I was just wondering what you thought was going to happen if now every other country is going to be issuing their own, or how that's going to affect trade, or how that's going to affect Bitcoin, everything else.
Well, I guess I'll start. A lot of this is hard to visualize and conceptualize what it's going to look like 10, 20 years from now. It's funny. I had the opportunity to have dinner with my inspiration, Ron Paul, a couple weeks ago, and I talked about this with Dr. Paul because I was really trying to get his input on where our thinking, my thinking, should be on this. And it was us and Patrick Byrne, the CEO of Overstock.com, chatting about this exact issue. And and Dr. Paul was like, well, why would you even, tell the government about this? Because there's so many amazing benefits that can be realized with blockchain. So do we really want to empower, the government with that, or central banks, right? It was kind of the reason why we face so many economic calamities over the past 100 years to begin with. So there was kind of that theory of, kind of let the current fiat fractional reserve monetary system just play itself out and let it self-implode, as it already has multiple times. Or do we empower them with better technology? And I don't know if I have an answer on that today. I definitely think monetary systems could be improved with blockchain, but it's really hard to say if that's something we believe government-sponsored entities should oversee, or if that's something the private sector should do. And that also gets into debates with the Constitution, because there's very specific ways in which the Constitution set out our monetary system, which really did not obviously conceptualize something like blockchain at that time. But I do think if you have other countries that are able to issue a fiat-based, or I guess a blockchain-based fiat currency, I do believe there will be people all over the world that see benefit in those monetary systems, because they'll be technically stronger and ultimately a better currency. Will you see people all over the world flock to that? And blockchain is a technology to build networks. So the stronger the network, the stronger the technology, and that's controlled by a government, maybe the stronger the government. And is that something we think Russia should be taking the lead on, or is that something that would look more, is that something we should do here in the United States? And I'll tell you, I met with one of the governors of the Federal Reserve Board last week, and they were saying this is not on our radar at all. We absolutely have no interest in doing that. But there's other central banks that have, and why are they, right? Like, why is Russia, why is China, and also some of these smaller countries that we compete with as well. So look at Singapore, look at the United Kingdom, look at Australia. These are other kinds of examples of countries that their governments have gotten ahead, and they're saying, we're going to welcome this technology, we're going to use this technology, we're going to use it to benefit our people. And again, it's one of those things that keeps me up at night. If the United States is not welcoming this technology into its district, it's ultimately going to go overseas. And I don't think we want to see that go to Russia and China. I think as an American, we all have an invested interest in having that here and develop here at home.
You guys have
Actually,
questions?
I'll add one more thing to that. So we submitted comments to the European Union Commission. So basically, their parliament. And they put out this white paper on distributed ledger technology. And there was one statement that stuck out at me, and it said, and again, this was written by the European Union, it said, let's not forget that the internet was invented in the United States, and it's still controlled by the United States. So that's on other countries' minds, and there are other jurisdictions that are recognizing that blockchain has massive potential. And again, I believe whatever government gets it right, figures it out, is able to welcome this technology into the district, is going to have massive benefits.
Just a question, piggybacking off of that. Don't you think there's a trade-off between trying to benefit the people and then relinquishing power within the government? So, if you want to do the best for the people, it's free market, libertarianism, and if you try to hold back on it, do you think that the government loses power in doing so?
But if another government in another country is using it, where does that put us, right? So it's very complicated. But I think ultimately, our mission is to promote the acceptance and use of blockchain technology. And so we want to see this technology grow and thrive, both in the public and the private sector. And let's face it, there's a lot of ways our government can improve. There's a lot of ways in which this would benefit all of us if the government had better technology. I mean, just think about, so I worked in the federal government, so I was part of the OPM hacks. It was a very high profile attack, an office in the White House. All their employment records were hacked and leaked, which included mine. So I got a letter in the mail that said, sorry, but we've, kind of lost track of your social security number. And I went and looked and I found it, and sure enough, it's for sale on the dark web. So thank you, U.S. government. Perhaps if we had a sovereign digital identity based on blockchain technology that our government implemented, that wouldn't have happened to me. So there are ways in which, I do think it would be beneficial for government to use this technology, and I think that will benefit, everybody.
My social security number has been leaked now 4 times. So I'm all for some sort of ID. There's a better solution out there.
You guys are like high profile, they're all trying to find you. But thanks for shedding light. That's just something I've been noticing.
All right, Pablo, you want to? Yeah.
Okay, you're on. So I think the adoption of blockchain technology by governments is inevitable over the long term. And I think within 10 to 15 years, we'll see a lot of countries start to issue their own digital currencies, just like Russia is working on and Dubai just did. What do you think the timeline would be for like the U.S.? What do you see as like the major obstacles holding the U.S. back from adopting the blockchain technologies and issuing their own digital currency? And what do you think it will take for them to overcome that, or for them to actually, start to take action on that?
Okay, so GSA has a blockchain initiative. If you Google GSA blockchain, their website will come up. And GSA is part of the Office of Management and Budget, or they're underneath OMB, and they're working together with OMB to put together an implementation strategy for the federal government. So they have a working group. They've brought together over 40 different government divisions, offices, departments, and they're coordinating the federal blockchain strategy right now. So they're coordinating, so the state, and the reason why they're doing this is so it's done in a way that is interoperable. So if the State Department decides they want to implement blockchain for identity, so perhaps passports, it's going to be important that the VA is not creating a completely separate identity platform, and that those departments are able to work with each other. So that's underway, and one thing that is really promising, the head of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, is this guy named Mick Mulvaney. He's from South Carolina. He was a member of Congress. He was the original co-founder of the Congressional Blockchain Caucus, and then Donald Trump chose him to lead the Office of Management and Budget. This is one of the most powerful positions in the White House. So Director Mulvaney's job is to put together the federal budget. So every single office in the entire federal government has to submit to Mick or Director Mulvaney their budget, and then he compiles the budget for all the different departments, offices, divisions, and gives the federal budget to President Trump. And then President Trump gives that to Congress. Congress votes on it and appropriates the funds. So Congress, or now Director Mulvaney, is probably in the most influential position over all of the agencies because he oversees their budget. And he's a massive blockchain advocate, and his office is working with GSA on this blockchain strategy. And they've already had 2 working sessions. One was just for government, and one was opened up to the private sector. And we got to participate in the one where they opened it up to members of the private sector. So I can tell you these initiatives are underway. It's not, this is obviously, it would be a massive feat to do. But we will start seeing government use cases being unveiled in the near term. And another thing we have seen is we've seen different government agencies do have contracts with either some of our members or other participants in this space. And I believe it's either DOD or DHS, Department of Defense or Department of Homeland Security, has issued a number of grants to some blockchain companies. And those have been made public. So this is all something that's not going to happen overnight, but those efforts are underway. But the U.S. government is the most complicated government in the world, so it's very, very big. There's a lot of different agencies, divisions. It's very different than in smaller countries. So like if you go to the United Kingdom, there's one financial regulator. It's the UK FCA, and that's it. So if you're a company that's trying to service the States, you have one regulator you have to talk to. Same thing with Singapore. They have what's called the Monetary Authority of Singapore. That's their central bank and their financial services regulator all in one. And that's like their go-to office you'd have to talk to if you were doing something in this space. In the United States, I can't even begin to go through all the acronyms, from the Securities and Exchange Commission to the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. We have two consumer regulators between the CFPB and the FTC. You have more law enforcement than I can even remember, all the different divisions that are out there. So it's a lot more complicated to one, get a policy strategy or an implementation strategy here. So we'll absolutely see other governments that are going to be able to get ahead just because that's working against us. But efforts are underway.
And I'll also add that at Bloq, we actually have a team member that his focus is solely on government strategy. And so while the primary focus will be on the U.S. and the government agencies here, he does do international work as well. But we are starting to see, and some of these use cases may be just baby steps, but they are use cases nonetheless. And they're everything from, a lot of them are just trying to improve efficiency. So I think that we will, in the next few years, at least start to see progress made with some of these.
Thank you.
Jordan, what about from the private sector? Because I know that Bloq works a lot with private companies, and I mean, even though they're not the size of the U.S. government, them trying to implement a blockchain technology in their infrastructure, how are their hurdles and what's their timeline?
I mean, the timeline varies with different companies. We can talk to some companies and they're pretty far along in their blockchain journey. And then other companies, they're just starting and, we have to go through more of a blockchain 101 and they kind of discuss what some of their use cases may be. So I think that it really varies. And, at Bloq, we're not just focused on one industry. We do everything from financial services to supply chain to insurance. And so in the financial services, we will see companies that are further along in their blockchain journey. And so we may see those use cases rolled out a bit sooner. But it could be, as soon as a year, or it could be longer than that before we really start to see a lot of progress, or we start to see these companies really start to make announcements about what they're doing, or they could just be internal use cases.
Thanks so much. Over in Gainesville, make sure to say your name before starting, so we know who you are.
Okay. I think we might have run out of time actually. So
I can make this really short.
If you make it really short.
Is it music?
Yes, it's speakers music. Okay.
Hi, I'm Kenton.
It's muted.
It's in music.
Yeah.
Could you all hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. My bad.
All right, excellent. I'm Kenton. First, I just wanted to thank Perianne and Jordan personally for a very informative talk thus far, and it's been very enjoyable on my end, and I hope the same applies to everyone here. So, as these hubs are formed and sprout, and the additional saplings of brain and talent flock to these hubs, whether it be in the U.S. or Russia or China, etc. I think that in addition to an advantage in financial flexibility and financial and the benefits that come with having a decentralized framework, I think that there would be other implications that would come. For example, the flock of talent to these hubs would be that would be based around cryptography and cybersecurity. And so I think that this would actually add value to the national security framework of an organization. So with that, just as an example, I could see how that would be an incentive, for instance, for Russia or China. Is the government, do they have any single driver that motivates them to further investigate blockchain technologies, or is it just that they don't want to be left in the dust?
Yeah, and that's, I think that'll be the last question that we have today, because our panelists do need to go. But if they could just give like a really quick 1 minute answer for that, that would be amazing.
So let me just make sure I understand the question. You're saying in jurisdictions where they have adopted Bitcoin and blockchain, how would that affect the industry overall?
No. It was actually from your view, being internal to the government and how they're handling this. Have you seen a clear driver, like in incentive? Like, are they doing this because of this, or are they just doing it because it's a new technology that they are inevitably having to investigate?
So I think you're giving the government a lot of credit. I don't think there's much of a coordinated strategy. I mean, with the exception of GSA and this guy there who's doing a really good job, this young guy named Justin Herman who's leading this initiative. But actually, you guys should invite to come talk at some point. But other than this one particular person, there's not, I'm not really seeing any leadership within the U.S. government. So this is really different than either the UK or Australia, where you have these leaders within government, high leaders, either the prime minister or the heads of their central banks or the heads of their regulatory departments, who have said, we recognize blockchain as an important technology, and we're going to find a way, although it's really complicated to put together, a policy strategy to welcome this into the industry. We're going to find a way to do this. And in fact, we're going to set up either a sandbox or an innovation arm, so companies who are innovating with this technology have a place to go and figure out, what needs to happen in order to get to market. That's just not happening in the United States. The only places where we really see U.S. Folks getting government folks, showing initiative is on the enforcement side. So pretty much everything that's come out of the U.S. federal government is enforcement actions. You can't do this, you can't do that, you're being fined, you're going to jail. There's really been a lack. I mean, there's a few people here and there, but overall the message is mostly enforcement. It's not innovation and technology, and that's kind of the challenge. So when you ask, what is their motive, it's cops are being cops, and we're seeing that happen. And there's a lot of cops in Washington. So we're working hard to find some additional champions, additional people like the CFTC Commissioner Chris Giancarlo, who's a big advocate for us, as well as the OMB Director Mick Mulvaney. But we need more. It needs to come from very high places.
Okay. Does Jordan want to add? Does
Pretty much summed up there.
I had one quick question.
no, well, I think they have to go. They said that they have to go.
Maybe you want to sign off the panel?
Yeah.
Well, thanks guys for having us. It was great chatting with you, and don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have additional questions, or if you need any resources as you're navigating through the space. Love that you guys have a Gator Bitcoin Club. Want to help continue to grow and support the club, and let us know how we can be helpful.
Thank you.
Yes, and also if anybody is a developer and you're looking for a job, don't hesitate to reach out to me. We are hiring right now, so also want to add that.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, well,
Great. We really get to learn a lot from industry leaders, and we look forward to keeping in touch.
Great.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Go Gators.
okay, everybody. So I hope that was really useful for you guys to sort of see what the industry is like, sort of the hurdles that companies are overcoming with the government, and sort of some economic ideas.
Can we have a discussion
around.
amongst ourselves?
Definitely, yes, please.
So who else thought that was very who thought that was very government centered?
I did.
Okay, so here's my question. If they use the parallel that the internet, I don't know, maybe I misheard this, but I thought that there was a parallel between the internet's adoption and what blockchain adoption could be. Did I make that up?
Yeah, I heard that.
Okay, so the government did not regulate the internet's creation or its eventual rollout. The government regulated, put taxes on e-commerce, whatever. So I'm missing the connection that both of the speakers made to government needs to take a leadership role. Private sector is going to drive the advancement of the technology, and then eventually government, as Perianne said right at the end, regulates and regulates the industry.
Yeah, so what I think was sort of more what they were focused on is that they've already introduced legislation because it's a value transfer as well. It's sort of that you're dealing with commerce as well.
What's a value transfer?
Well, cryptocurrencies in general.
No, blockchain.
I think what you're talking about is exactly what she mentioned with Dr. Rand Paul, right? I mean, with like, why even introduce it to the government if they're not, going to have why would we want an influence on ourselves by showing it to the government and allowing them to regulate it? Is that what you're...
Well, no, the government will regulate. All governments will regulate shit. We know that. But you do not need a government body to tell you how the blockchain is created or adopted. Industry leaders are advancing the blockchain. If you've been on Wall Street, you know that that is a true statement. Wall Street is not saying to Washington, tell us how to write and adopt the blockchain. Now, you keep saying, you say cryptocurrencies. That's an entirely different concept, and I'm not saying that that's not my statement. My statement is the blockchain. I mean, just here we are discussing something. Do you think that the government needs to give endorsement for the blockchain?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
What are they endorsing?
Well, Social Security was when she was talking about how Social Security is easily.
No, what are they endorsing? How to write the code?
No, a sandbox, as you were saying, a place for ideas, a place where companies can come in and then they'll get some sort of benefit.
You're going to get that out of the government?
I don't think the government is really necessary. How I see it, it's like.
Well, is there a parallel with the internet?
Well, the thing is, the government is not necessary. But the thing is, Russia, China, all these people are putting money down for this. And somebody raised a question, I don't quite remember who, that if they do this, you're going to see people flocking over these countries. People who are in cryptocurrency, in crypto, in cryptography, in cybersecurity, they're going to be flocking to these countries to get a job there. So the idea is that the United States government, with its massive power, starts funneling money into this blockchain technology. We'll be getting more people over here concentrated on a technology that could possibly revolutionize the world.
What would the money go to?
Sandboxing, creating new ideas, proposing new proposals to the blockchain technology, seeing where we can take this blockchain technology, seeing what the benefits is. I mean, right now this is a known. We just know it's the kind of general idea of what it can do. But we're not certain of its full capabilities yet.
I'm trying to understand, because they mentioned the internet. The government did not write the code for the internet. I mean, it was used as a research vehicle in education, academia. The private sector made it commercial.
I agree. I don't think there should be government involvement. And if it's only for the reason of generating new ideas, that should be done in the private sector. As well as, I think the government is scared of because I think the blockchain technology, if it was just blockchain, their government wouldn't need to try and regulate it, but because it's dealing with Bitcoin and the transfer of value, like assets, I think that's why the government is racing to try and lead, not by far not lead, but like just establish themselves as a presence in this space to try and exert power.
Okay, but now you said something really interesting. I don't want to monopolize this because I'm hoping that this prompts a discussion. But you said something really interesting. You said that the government and then Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, I'm paraphrasing. Think back to the internet analogy. Does the government regulate the internet?
No.
Why would the government tax, regulate, or have anything to do with the blockchain technology? There is a precedent.
So what I think they were trying to say is that not that the government is going to lead the movement behind blockchain. I think it's more that blockchain has the potential to make a lot of government processes, and it has a big application in government. And so
does the internet.
Right, exactly. And then the government adopted the internet. It just took a certain amount of time. The government adopted the internet. So just like that, they're going to adopt blockchain after a certain amount of time.
And I think they're calling for, well, not true, I think they're calling for government leadership. And I think I'm hearing, well, that's private sector.
What degree the government enables the private sector, so that, like, since a lot of the internet, our private sector is very into the internet, it's like the same parallel.
I think she was saying she wanted less government and blockchain, and then she also wanted more blockchain and government.
That's true. But that's going to happen.
I think that's what we all want. Probably like you would get more protections for the blockchain, because if you have like internet service providers that can like, you know, how fast your internet is, you know, that's its own thing, and they could end up affecting the chain itself. So like when you have some regulations, or not regulations, certain protections that can guarantee like the government's watching like how, you know, the ISPs are regulating it, then that's not fair, then the government can clamp down on that. So you do want some help, but you know, don't so much.
I mean, the way I see it is that blockchain sort of enables asset transfer, peer-to-peer, so trustless asset transfer, and that's like a core proponent of aspect of blockchain technology, is that there's this transfer of assets. Sort of.
I thought it was a distributed record that offered transparency.
Yeah, I would like to echo that as well, actually. So currently, the way that a decentralized system can sustain itself is through an incentivized ecosystem. And I do not think there is a decentralized system yet that can be incentivized without assets, some sort of assets or value that we agree on, that has value. Fundamentally, what system is, it's an immutable, ongoing system that has no one central point of control, and that is essentially ongoing.
So then do you think there would be no, like, without the transfer of assets, because like the transfer of value, the blockchain wouldn't exist?
Who would devote any of their resources?
No, I'm not even. I'm not even saying.
I know. But just speaking in a general sense, who would devote their resources to
something that you're not going to get incentivized for? Right. Makes sense. So that's why Bitcoin grew the blockchain so well, because through Bitcoin that ended up growing the network itself with it.
To grow off of that, right? Like, and I think Witt has an excellent point now that decentralized systems, the true value of it, or not true, but a large portion of its forthcoming value will come from the infrastructures that are developed centralized framework. Right, and so that's like
based on that platform.
Correct. Based off of blockchain, right? Blockchain started off as financial systems, right?
And I agree they can be incentivized different ways. In this case, Bitcoin through miners, but like when the blockchain becomes
huge.
revolutionary and worldwide, they could be incentivized through anything, any sort of value.
Well, yeah, but
Make
again,
it worth their time.
that just falls back to like what is the most efficient unit of value that you can
Right.
transfer. Right now, it's currently Bitcoin or Monero. Or,
Right, but
or,
the overall scheme of the thing is you don't want government to be, because that's going to cancel out the whole decentralized purpose. That's what makes it centralized.
Of course. So like I think that, and Perianne hit that on the head.
Mhm.
I think that the government does not have a motive to be the leader in this.
Which is
space.
why I see a problem
Right.
with Ruble coin and J coin from Japan.
Of course,
that makes them centralized.
But
Again.
I like the government's involvement has been from a policing standpoint.
Right, instead of an encouraging standpoint.
And I think that's because the people in Capitol Hill, they're principled. Like it's not only that they're incentivized to work for the good government through money, right? But they believe in the value of a fair system, right? And so when people get scammed, when old grandma down the street loses all of her life savings, and this happens to thousands of people in the U.S., thousands, tens of thousands, even worldwide, the government is going to now look at this space as a police person.
Right, because they're trying to protect the people, but overall, if they let this grow, it could end up being, people are going to get hurt along the way, but it could be,
But again, I think
Correct.
you're mixing things here. An ICO is no different than, hi, I'm a prince in Nigeria, in Africa, and it's that same, right? I mean, everybody knows that an ICO is nothing more than the biggest piece of crap out there. If you don't, then you fall victim to that same, I'm a prince from Nigeria, please send me $100,000. You know that.
Well, no, I
An ICO
there's still value.
was not, no,
it's not until they prove that there is value.
No. There's absolutely there is no store value in an ICO. Tonight, if we have 25 of us, we can form an ICO by 7 a.m. and be in the market tomorrow morning.
It's true. Anybody.
No, I mean, that's serious. It's very serious. It's no different than if we did we're princes from Nigeria.
And then some of those ICOs actually do end up growing and stealing so much money because people think they're real.
Right? Fool at the end, just like you need the fool to send in $100 to the prince from Nigeria. It's a scam. But see, that again comes away from the bit.
I think that was the general idea of trying to protect the people though from the technology. Instead of encouraging it and letting sensitivity, right? Right, but the blockchain, like we were saying, was incentivized, and that's what makes it worthwhile. And that's what leads to its development and evolution.
That is what leads to including value transfer now, right?
Right. So maybe not its development, maybe for its evolution and its implementation. I feel like.
Do you guys believe the government should funnel money for research?
No, I don't think it's the government's job.
Well, I think this discussion, if I'm just give on a summit, the technology is separate of the value, of the storage of the unit of value. I mean, think about it. I'm trying to say, is the blockchain the equivalent of the telephone when it was created? It was a platform in order to distribute information. In this case, this is a platform that that creates records of information, right?
Yeah. So there are a couple of things I want to.
Let me just mention then. So if the telephone, hi, Watson, come here, and the same thing, right? You can use the telephone for nefarious purposes. You can use the blockchain to create ICOs, which does no good.
I think that the initial intention of an ICO was just a token generation.
Right. I mean,
right. So
Ethereum was
the initial point, but it has soon proved itself to be a convenient vehicle for scams.
Never in a million years would you invest in an ICO, and you know it.
No. I would not. No. I cannot. Right. And it's
there are many of them that are scams, but they're
all scams.
So the thing about ICOs,
it's hard to also like
what they've done is they've opened up venture capital for the common man instead of just ICOs have enabled.
Are you guys
Well,
fucking dumb? You know what an ICO is? It's the same thing as an I'm a prince from Nigeria.
It's not.
it's
Okay.
what you
Okay.
hear about it's
Then why don't you put?
no. Wait. That's a good point. So right? I think that there are other ways to distribute tokens rather than we're releasing it all in one event before the product is even built. I think that these ICOs the stigma that they have gained is extremely negative now, and I think that the transition to different token generating or token distribution approaches is required, right? Ones that are less susceptible to scams.
Yeah, so the thing with ICOs is that it's something that you have to do your due diligence on as an investor. So for example, just like if venture capitalists aren't going to fund bullshit organizations that pitch to them, that obviously have no product.
How does someone vet the company in an ICO if there's no financial reporting requirements?
So there are different ones.
The 8-ball, Magic 8-ball.
That have launched, for example, right? It's just one that comes off the top of my head right now. I'm not, and this club is not about trying to push investment on members or anything like that. So I want to make that clear. But what you can see from these basically platforms is that Omise Go is a parent of Omise, which has already proven itself as a payment processing platform in Thailand. They have like thousands of merchants. They've already done things in the space that show that they have tangible value. They have a reputable team. Certainly, I would not invest in an ICO that does not label who their team is, does not talk about what they do, does not have a clear vision of what they're trying to solve. But what you can see is that anybody can invest in these ICOs, which is a big risk, which is sort of why I think that there is beneficial regulation that can occur in this space. But with that big risk comes the fact that if you're not an accredited investor, if you don't have $1 million to invest in these startup companies, then you can't invest in the next Facebook, Twitter, or anything like that.
You couldn't have your money stolen from you either.
Certainly, and I mean, venture capitalists lose money all the time.
It's like a wild west of investing all day.
How about this? We have a disagreement about ICOs.
For sure.
Please, if anybody, I'm saying this because I would like to just protect you all. Right? Gators help each other out.
I think the thing about ICO is it lays in a very wild west, and nobody really knows exactly what's going on. And I guess you can look at it and you can generalize and say everything is going to be bad, or you can take the opportunity to look at each one individual and say, hey, is this one good? Is this one not good?
I think this would be a very good opportunity to use the crypto challenge and see if ICOs are even more prosperous than trading.
Can you buy a cryptocurrency that's going to go on being used for an ICO?
You can, but usually
there you go. That could be somebody's trading strategy.
usually it's big investments that they only with
Maybe
like pre-sales,
that's
right?
a good vehicle
Like
for
pre-sales.
crypto challenge.
Yeah, like they do pre-sales token. Right. Yeah. You have to know somebody, but usually it's $20,000 minimum.
Do you know anything about the Ethereum? Because that was before I.
Exactly. So another thing about blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies or tokens that would be involved in ICO is that Bitcoin led the way in developing blockchain technology and stuff like that, right? But it started off at value of nothing. And from that, it took a very long time, relatively, for value to come out of that and for people to actually use it as currency for it to gain value. But what we can see with ICOs is that we can peg this to to an existing cryptocurrency so that people can distribute their token and have distributed basically security properties for their blockchain. But let's leave the topic of ICOs. But I definitely want to touch back
So
on
you
what
think that there's been value that's been produced in the cryptocurrency run-up in the last, in this year? You think that cryptocurrency, when we met on Wednesday night, on Thursday morning, the Bitcoin opened up $5,000 in trading in Europe for the first time ever. It traded at 5,700 on Friday night at the close. So you think that over the course of 36 hours, that value 500 or 700 over 5,000 is whatever that percentage is. Yeah. There was an increase in value, 12%, because why? Because why?
it's speculative.
Well,
so isn't it all speculative when she said that it went from $9 a coin in 2014
I think
to what is it, 6,000 now?
I think
that doesn't mean that
there are 2 points that could be argued. One side says the growth is due to speculation. I'm on that side, but I feel like it's still good to recognize the other side, where someone could say this is a more accurate value of what cryptocurrencies bring, and now it's finally met by the market. That's
Okay,
just another argument.
Imagine that I offered you $10 million for a piece of shit house in College Park. I walked over to College Park and I bought, and there's like, piece of shit house, and I now offered $10 million. Does that mean every house in College Park is worth $10 million?
No. And that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. I'm specifying.
Was there value there?
I'm specifying with Bitcoin.
It's the same thing.
No, but it's not. It's actually. It's actually not. Let me add on that.
You understand that?
Right.
So you understand the market,
but the value is determined upon so many people that are trading, and because there's so many people that are involved, it's not a low money. It's not like it's something that.
No, that's not value. That's not value. That's not value. If I gave you $500 for those sunglasses,
right,
the glasses are not valued at $500.
You value them at $500. But if that's what the market value
that at $500,
right? It is subjective. But if someone's willing to pay that for it, that's what they're putting about.
$500. Was that value? It isn't value.
So then, what would you determine? Like, what's the difference between that and a normal, just something on the S&P 500 that rises in value?
Well, if you have a stock analyst, he or she is going to look at the expected value of future earnings. They're going to discount that back using some percentage rate.
But there's companies that are growing and are trying to be a company like that and are going to have earnings that will grow their ICOs. It's just right now it's such a beginning stage that it's so early. Because we haven't been able to see it grow. There's nothing to base projections off of because it's originated.
I would love to understand, because I want to learn. I'm here to learn. I would love to know where there's value.
I agree with you. $700 swings in the course of a week is, from my perspective, almost entirely speculative. But over the long term, if you look at the potential that this technology has, you can look at where you personally value Bitcoin or any other stock, and then you can.
Great point. What did the blockchain do to increase the speculative nature of that Bitcoin?
It cannibalized the gold market, right? A lot of people pull their money out of gold and other.
That's where I think we just have to disconnect. Every time you say that there's value, you attribute it to the blockchain. Well, I'm trying to learn where the blockchain creates value from going from $9 to 57.
In this case, it's difficulty in supply. The more difficult the network gets, the less supply there is in the network. The less amount people can buy. Right now, in the beginning, you could buy a crap ton based on the difficulty. You can buy it.
But that's economics. That's great.
That's
houses.
You're talking about what the technological value of it?
Well, no, because I keep hearing this connection between the reason why the blockchain. Can I say it? The blockchain is enabling the increased speculative numbers in the Bitcoin.
So if the rise in Bitcoin is purely speculative on if it will be adopted as that currency, then it's still speculative until it gets given value.
But it's still speculative.
What does the blockchain have to do with it?
That's what Bitcoin is built on. It uses the blockchain to.
Correct, and that's what she said. Perianne said that. I love that one statement. But so could medical records.
Right.
So could Gator season tickets.
So you're saying why does Bitcoin have this value when anything can utilize the blockchain? Because it's speculative on whether people are going to give it value at some point. And the same thing for ICOs. It's the same. If people are going
so
to
you need a bigger fool than me to buy at 57.80.
Oh, I'm not saying this is a good price to buy.
In the same sense that I think gold has limited supply in the world and people put value to gold, Bitcoin represents a digital gold.
Right.
But isn't gold tied to some determined value?
In the same sense
that
Bitcoin
that's collectively accepted.
Doesn't have any value.
But
That's
who determines the value of gold? How do you tie that value of gold to
The gold was established in the Benton Woods Complex.
Right. So
When
all the gold was mined, right? They established the supply of gold, and then they just established the demand of gold, and that's what determined the price. And when all the Bitcoin is mined and it's all available, it doesn't even have to be mined. It's just centralized.
So
But
why
how
is
does
gold
that,
without
that's
value?
why gold how does that tie to the blockchain? Because the blockchain is the vehicle.
Yes,
Exactly.
Going back to your phone example, you mentioned the phone and Bitcoin. I feel like the blockchain is the lines running underground that connects the phone, and the phone is the Bitcoin in that sense. Does that sort of make sense?
Right.
I feel like the information being talked about is the Bitcoin.
Something that
That is the value.
something I wanted to bring up earlier when we were talking about this before we got on the whole ICO talk and all that is that what the governments aren't doing is they're not regulating blockchain technology as a pure blockchain technology form. What you're seeing is Bitcoin and blockchain technology. Bitcoin necessitates basically people to secure the network publicly. So because we have a public blockchain here, we need people around the world to put their energy into securing the network. For that reason, they don't do it for free. They need an incentive to do that. Now, if you have a privatized company or something that wants to use it for internal regulation, or you have a permission consortium of companies that want to track assets, maybe they don't need that external money, Bitcoin incentive. Instead, they'll just have the incentive of, oh, it's a more secure network. So because it's public, people anyone from around the world can basically put their resources into it and expect a profit, generally speaking, from putting their resources into securing a network. But if I'm going to be a private company, or something that Joel likes to talk about, for example, in GE, they have different sections for different industries. Maybe they, as all separate industries, want to talk to each other about the state of their holdings.
But no private industry has its own proprietary internet.
Intranet.
The internet is a public, global.
Yeah, there's the internet and there's the intranet.
The internet. Companies have intranets for sure.
Yeah.
But that's for internal communications. General Electric, Goldman Sachs, they all use the internet, just like all of them will use the public blockchain. They all will use that. There is nothing magical about the blockchain other than it being secured by people who are incented to make it better by getting Bitcoin incentivized. Okay, I got that. I got all of that. What I keep hearing is that the reason why there's this run up in the price of the Bitcoin, and I'm hearing this here, is because of the blockchain. And I'm just saying, I just don't believe it. I think that we could sit out front in that courtyard, and if we had a trading interest, we could trade Bitcoin at some numbers that we just pick out of the air. There's nothing to do with the blockchain.
I think the rise in price is basically the same analogy that you gave me with my sunglasses, because it's people are determining that's the value, that's what people are going to pay for it, and because it's the supply.
That's where I think I go with that. I go with Felipe's. I do understand the mining thing.
I perfectly understand. Now, if you had 5 glasses and you say I'm selling one at 500, and then somebody buys it, and you say, you know what, I'm going to sell the second one now at 1,000. That makes sense. I just don't quite understand what your point is.
Okay, well, how about this? I watched this video which some of you have seen, Mike Novogratz. He's the big hedge fund guy, right? 45-minute video. I thought it was fascinating. And he is out there. He doesn't care what he'll trade in pens. He doesn't care. And he predicts that it's going to go from $5,000 in 6 to 12 months, right? Mike could care less if there was a widow or an orphan, whether she saw value or not. He's just going to participate in this bubble until it bursts.
Which is probably what most people are doing.
He doesn't see value. And you never hear him in 45 minutes, this guy who appears to be pretty damn smart, never once does he say that there is value. He does call it a unit of stored value as his cryptocurrency.
I would say that I would agree with that, and it's not actually given a value until there's a real world purpose. But the speculative nature that there could be a real world purpose to this is what it's giving it the ability for investments to make money on it because of its rise in price. So even if it is a bubble, investors are looking at it as a way to make money because it is a bubble.
And let me touch on that also because you're talking about value for payments basically right now. Bitcoin is by far the biggest and its primary use case is for payments. And you're talking about trying to get value in a first world country for payments when there's a whole remittance market where Western Union takes ridiculous fees for sending back payments back to your family that lives in a different country. Whereas with Bitcoin, you can send it in 10 minutes instead of weeks with much fewer fees. And that's already extreme value for those people that are in that situation.
But it isn't it is not sending the currency. That's what I think you keep. It's not creating a market of the currency. It's allowing the frictionless transaction to occur without it having to go through the Western Union server and Western Union screwing you for fees. That's the blockchain. That's not the cryptocurrency.
That's because you're still cashing it out in whatever currency you're going to be, right? So
in Mexican peso,
which is I agree, which is why.
But that again, that's the transmittal.
It's not just one blockchain that everything.
But they're not getting cryptocurrencies in Mexico City when they get the remittance.
Yeah, right.
What I was going to say about value real quick is that like just like with any other currency, the only thing that gives it value is acceptance. So like if I tear this piece of paper off,
that's incorrect. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Because a currency is backed by a thing called fiat.
Exactly.
Look up the word because that's really important. You're missing this here. That's a government issued activity. Fiat.
I would say that there's a parallel to that in Bitcoin through the network. It's called proof of work, and the miners go and they work and they use their hashing power to create the Bitcoin.
There's no value. It's all speculative.
It's going to be speculative until it leads to the ultimate value of the real world use.
There's speculation in the U.S. dollar.
Right, I agree. There's going to be speculation. There's also going to be actual value.
But the U.S. dollar is backed by fiat.
Okay, and the blockchain and Bitcoins are backed by proof of work.
Yeah, what's gold backed by?
What gives fiat value? If I didn't accept it, why would it be valuable?
Because there's such a thing called a treasury.
Because it's backed
by
the
treasury.
What about when they confiscated everybody's gold and said you can no longer trade?
No. That's a gold standard. Fiat is the treasury's.
Right, but now the treasury is no longer backed by gold. So imagine this dollar, right? It's all changed in value.
No, that was taken off the gold standard. Please understand that. In 1950, the dollar was removed from the gold standard. That opened up global trading because it wasn't tied to a fixed unit of measure. So please understand that. So for even before I was born, that was removed. Now we're using a system where the government like even the UAE is a government, they back their currency.
So what makes that better than this?
So what does it? You tell me. You tell me. Say for instance, you ripped that piece of paper.
It's more objective.
And you went across the to Chipotle and you said you'd like to pay, and you put a number 10 on that.
Yeah.
You give it to them. They would laugh you out of there.
Well, let's say they did it. Let's say they did laugh you out.
Okay.
Then what?
Then what would they do? Then they need a next person to accept that 10.
Exactly.
And then they need the next person. Right, is there any different
Acceptance.
than the greater
So,
pool?
so the reason why this increased in value so much is because
More
literally
knowledge.
Japan as a country said, hey, now we're gonna start accepting this as a payment system. Teachers.
Right, it's a
people who are
consensus.
working
So what
for
if people
the government for payments? So now people are literally using this currency in an actual country and it's actually accepted. So the value goes up, people are actually accepting this. And so this is over time, more and more people are accepting this as an actual currency. This is the only thing that doesn't make this bullshit. It isn't an IOU in my pocket. I can't go get anything for this. This is just a piece of paper the treasury printed out. This is the same thing, except it's just more secure and we know what's going on.
That's a currency. That's a currency backed by a thing called fiat.
But what if, okay, so then, I agree with what he's saying about acceptance. What if we don't accept fiat? You're saying it's backed by the treasury. What if we don't accept that what does the treasury do to provide the insurance in fiat? What do? They print money because there can be an increase in money, and that's what backs the fiat.
Full faith and credit of the U.S. federal government.
And what if the increase in money leads to the absolute fall of the
What's happening in Venezuela?
They're using Bitcoin.
What happened in Venezuela when the currency collapsed?
Right.
What happened?
Complete chaos.
Okay. That lost the fiat.
Right.
That
lost the acceptance of the fiat.
Correct.
And it's leading to the acceptance of Bitcoin.
Yes.
They're going away from the fiat, they're going to the network because there's a proof of work in the network. So there's not a proof of work.
Fair enough. What happens when the government reestablishes a currency?
Who says that they're ever going to? Why wouldn't they just accept Bitcoin? Why would they ever give their name to another?
What's the function of a government? Taxation. So what are they going to collect?
It should not be taxation. The role of a government should be
it should be
secure
organized.
the safety of the people that live in it as well as keep it away from external.
Why can't it be private sector to everything that's going on in Venezuela?
Will Venezuela accept the taxes? I mean, because I think that Perianne made the point. She said this is why you're not going to pay in currency. You're not going to pay in Bitcoin for your cup of coffee. How would they tax that?
How would they tax the Bitcoin on your coffee?
Yeah.
Why do they need to?
Well, don't governments run on taxes?
But why does there need to be?
That's
a yes. Okay, so expand. So why? Okay, yes, but why do they need to?
Why do governments need to collect taxes?
No, not why do governments need to collect taxes? Why can't we privatize the sector to whatever government would need to do if they don't need to establish a currency?
I think, let's convert this to gold. Why can't Starbucks accept gold? Why can't I just walk in with a gold medal, give the Starbucks guy a gold medal and say, hey, let me get my coffee? And that really just depends on Starbucks. And I believe the government shouldn't have a say to come in and say, hey, you should not be exchanging gold. In the same sense that the government, I don't think, should come in and say,
who told Starbucks that they can't accept gold?
Nobody. It's just an example. In the same sense that about the cryptocurrency, I don't believe the government should be coming in and saying, hey, you should not be trading in Bitcoin. You shouldn't be giving
exactly. So if it's a better currency and people are going to start accepting it, which
One moment. Has the government said that you cannot accept Bitcoin?
Well, you were mentioning.
No. Just I want to. No. The reason why I'm asking is because I saw an article. I saw a really interesting article about a home, a mansion in London that's on the market for 25 million Bitcoin, and it has an equivalent pound sterling rate. I think that's fascinating, right? So, but the government didn't say that seller/realtor can not put that in Bitcoin.
Right, but my question is, should it be the government's job to do that? Should the government say,
I'm
well,
saying no, but I'm hearing
you
all say that the government's telling people not to accept Bitcoin.
So the way that they're doing that, like Perianne is doing as part of the Chamber of Digital Commerce, is because the government has regulations about money transfer. They have laws for money transfer and for taking your assets out of crypto.
The United States government regulates money transfer?
But I mean, more heavily than they would regulate.
I know the United States government says you can't charge usury interest rates. You can't screw people over by charging 36% interest on the
loan. Taxes is regulating money transfer.
No, I'm trying to understand where the government has said that Bitcoin's not accepted.
They haven't, but there's other countries that have.
If they have,
China has. They never have. You're right. They never have.
If they have,
because that would be direct.
If they have, come on, if they have, why won't companies accept Bitcoin?
Because of the legislation behind it. Why would I accept Bitcoin when I'm gonna be taxed 35%, or when I could just accept $1 and be taxed 6% sales tax?
So
it's totally different. So that's what they were saying up there. So all this legislation is like policing and enforcing all these rules instead of the government coming in and being like.
Okay, but what happens if you paid your tax, since it's capital gains tax? It's they said they're classifying it as tangible property.
Yeah.
And then you pay a 1 year.
So capital gains, you have to hold on to it. That's what
You
you're
don't
saying.
have to hold on to capital gains for anything. I can buy and sell in a minute, and I'll just pay capital gain tax. I'll just not for your benefit. Well, taxes don't really benefit anyone. But it doesn't mean that you can't. It means that from a motivational standpoint, you don't want to.
Well, 35% tax, which is 6% tax, I think it's enough.
Where's there a 6% tax?
On the sales tax.
Pardon me? No, we're talking about if you imagine this. Imagine I bought a property, I held and I sold it in a month, and I made a speculative run up. Let's say I made $1 million in a month. I can spend it. I can spend that money. I can spend that money. Eventually, I'm going to owe the government whatever the capital gains rate.
You can bring it back to United States dollars.
Let's say I bought this for $1. I sold it for $100. I now have a $99 gain, which I can spend now. I can do it right now. Eventually, I owe the government some percent of that $99. I go buy I go buy Starbucks coffee, and they charge me about 7% interest, a tax. There's nothing to say that I can't use that money. I'm still being taxed.
I think
as a capital gains.
I think maybe there's a problem of misunderstanding. I think from my understanding, where we're trying to come from is Bitcoin should be accepted as a currency. And when I go out to Starbucks and I try to spend my Bitcoin, I should be spending it as though it was a currency as opposed to.
How is it a currency? That's what I think that's where we have a fundamental difference.
Let's call it a cryptocurrency.
So you'd have to have a new classification.
Sure, let's call it a cryptocurrency.
Because right now, currency, as indicated, I mean, we could live on a Pacific island and we could use coconuts as currency.
Right.
But you couldn't transfer that to London.
Right.
We got that. Okay, so fair enough. But currency, as described in global economics, is backed by a government.
Which is why that in the financial systems today, which everybody says, every economist, anybody who really studies this for their life, is they say there's been no financial system that has been perfect yet. We're still figuring it out. And that's why we want to figure this out. We want to see if this is better than what is in place now. Because just like how you're saying, in one island, I can have coconuts, right? Let's go to some of these places in Nigeria. Let's go to some of these countries that are so in the middle of Africa where they can't even give currency to these people. They don't have any banking institutions. They don't have anything. But Bitcoin gives them the power to now be a part of the global market. Because if not, imagine if I don't have a birth certificate, I don't have a social security. I was born in the middle of a village in some random farm, in the middle of the field. I can't go to a banking institution and start an account. First, I have to have money to put in your account. To have a savings account, first you have to have money. So how can I be part of the global market if I'm not already part of the global market?
That's a different issue.
I know, it is.
These are bankable people versus unbankable people.
But this gives
I want to make sure, because I came into this whole concept, and I think this is kind of the underscoring of what I think you're going to experience in 30 days if you're in the crypto challenge. You are not going to be able to pinpoint a value. You're going to see that there's just going to be this wild-ass, irrational reaction to what's happening when hedge fund managers like Mike Novogratz come out and say, I'm putting my money in cryptocurrencies. Why wouldn't he? It's like putting money on red at roulette in Vegas.
In the short term.
Why not? He doesn't say, you watch that video, it's pretty telling. He doesn't say he's going to put, he thinks we should put the American, the Social Security system on a Bitcoin. He's just thinking you almost want to give the guy dude, you got some balls. Because all he's saying is, I'm just going to ride this up. That's all he said. He's going to ride it up. He's waiting for more sheep to come in to be slaughtered.
And it's understandable though.
But I think
That's he's part of the speculative group.
If that's understandable.
It's understandable, sustainable
then how
that
do you
he's
say
in that group.
There's value there. If that's understandable, he's just taking advantage of suckers.
That's effectively what he's doing.
But isn't that what the whole Bitcoin
There's people that were
market is?
suckers that thought when they bought at that bump in 2013 and hit $1,100, they thought they were suckers then too. If they just hold on to it, they'll see that the actual value rises.
No.
Why did it rise?
No, it's
why did that rise?
The network has been doubling in users every year. That is an insane amount of just individuals now believing in Bitcoin.
Okay. It's not just value, it's quality. Hold on,
guys. Let's think about markets. Think about markets. Guys, I've lived through this in Wall Street. I've been through Silicon Valley.
You're right.
I'm not saying I know it all. Let me just talk about markets. Because this shit's gonna happen. Let's call this as Monday. Tuesday. Next Thursday, Christmas Eve. Now you're gonna tell me the value got lost? Value got lost?
Well, you said there was no value.
Right? From Monday to Tuesday to next Thursday, Christmas Eve.
How about we look at this graph as opposed to value, just look at its trust. If you look at the first bump right here, where it went to $1,000, what happened is Mt. Gox, the biggest exchange in the world. Bitcoin was at $1,000. In literally about a month, Bitcoin went down to $200. That is purely based on trust. That is purely people saying, "Oh my God, Bitcoin, 400 million disappeared. Should we continue trusting this technology? Should we continue trusting?" People over here said no, and they went down all the way to 200. And now people are saying, "Whoa, maybe we should believe in it." And now it's going up. So it's until the next big thing happens, and suddenly Bitcoin is no longer trusted, that I think it's going to spike down. But until then, people are giving it value, and the value is currently
Back to your example about when the price dropped and it still had value. That's like asking in 2008 when General Motors stock was at zero, their factory could still produce cars. It's just like they still had value, but like nobody else
That's
knows
a good
that.
point. I want to share something. I've been into this like 4 or 5 years, and the only reason that the price is pointed at 5,754 right now is network effect. There is way better cryptocurrencies out there, and this is a pure speculation that's happening right now. I mean, you see, 2010 was 25 cents, and how is this possible? In 7 years, just soared to 5,000. It's in front of our eyes. There's a network effect. The entire world is adopting. Oh my God, we want to get rich. Let's just invest in this, and the price keeps going up. But at the end of the day, I believe it will go down.
And then I want to add on that. So earlier with the whole government, and so I wrote down my answer. So blockchain allows decentralization, which is an advantage of more than less than one. It's an actual advantage that we all see economically, socially, whatever. It's a technological method that makes processing harder because it's natural for us to adopt something that helps us. Government may come in because they see that this is a trend, and so of course they're going to adopt it to survive themselves. I'm looking at this as a very anthropological way, because if we see value in something, like Tony was saying, it's a network effect. That's more people keep coming on and on. And if we see intrinsic value that may not actually be there, then in a way there is value because we are making value, and now we have actually implemented something such as actual cash into the system that is now backed up with actual cash. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that I don't understand about blockchain, but overall that just seems what's going on. At least we see it's important in this, and I don't know if there's any finite secure, factor, but that's what I see.
I've been blown away by you guys with the whole club, and I can't stop thinking about this. I think you're a little misdirected on the Bitcoin. Instead, if you were focused on the blockchain, oh my gosh, that is going to be in your lives, professionally and personally, for 100 years, for your children's lives. That is going to transform the world, not Bitcoin, not Paris Hilton cryptocurrency.
I think at least the executive board members, I don't want to speak for all of us, but I think our concentration isn't purely on Bitcoin here in the club. It is concentrated on blockchain, it is concentrated on expanding people's knowledge, but it comes with understanding Bitcoin first and foremost, because this is, after all, what introduced blockchain to the world.
So just that, because I don't understand Bitcoin other than just being the tulip bubble of the Netherlands when that burst, right? I got that, but bubbles happen over time. Bubbles happen in Silicon Valley on Sand Hill Road. I mean, could you possibly tell me how Uber is valued at $69 million, at $73 billion? Uber doesn't charge enough money on a ride in order to cover its costs. In other words, the investors on Sand Hill Road are subsidizing your ride in Uber tonight. If there wasn't an investor from Sand Hill Road in Uber's bank account, it would cost you $20 to go from here to right, and the same price that it costs the green cab company to take you there. So then think about that. So then why is it think about that?
In a similar sense, that why never make profit.
Yeah, I know, and Bezos is upset when they make profits. He really is.
Yes. And look where Amazon is now. It doesn't care really about profit. I think maybe that's one of the investors in the network as well.
Fair enough, but in a global economy that's driven by for-profit companies, I really do believe, gator to gator, I think we have to believe in profit. I really do. Not steal people's money, but I think you have to be incented by the profit motive. And where I'm, I do get concerned. You guys are smart. You got to figure this shit out. I do get concerned when the press reports that Uber is a success. Uber loses billions of dollars a quarter. That's in 90 days. I think we did this in class. We figured out what the per day loss of Uber was. One quarter when they lost $2.6 billion. It was something like $90 million a day. You break it down to an hour and a minute. It's obscene.
You don't think that there's any value inherent in a network that people are all networking into?
No, I do. I do. But what I'm saying is that there's a parallel that you cannot tell me any type of model, any network, because okay, so the Uber model work. So you're going to justify that we have Uber around the world, and that justifies a valuation that's inflated.
Let me ask you a question because I personally don't know. Could Uber be for profit overnight if they so choose to? If they remove
have to raise the prices, it would change the business model, right? And maybe that just turns us off. You're like, no, the reason why I want to go to Uber,
let me propose something to you. Uber right now is working on technology to out-drive cars. They want to have cars out on the road that have no drivers.
Right.
That will make them for profit.
Correct.
So in a sense, maybe they're investing in the future. The investors
Today, the network effect of Uber is to expand around the world, which makes perfect sense, right? But they can't make money at their core business. In Gainesville, Florida, Uber can't make money.
But once they put autonomous drivers out there, they are instantly in the for-profit side.
And aren't they competing against other?
Okay, how do they last that long? If they're
investors, people who just believe it, and they just throw money at them.
So the investors hoping, praying that they just survive.
I don't think they're praying. There's a lot of money going into research right now, especially Uber, Google, Apple, all these cars.
But unless they achieve self-driving vehicles, they're not going. The investor eventually is going to say, "Screw you, Uber. We're done."
Certainly. But I mean, Uber's right now, they actually have, I don't know exactly what city, but they do have autonomous cars going around in the specific cities just for testing purposes.
Yeah. Well, see, that's why I love the network effect. I wholeheartedly embrace what you guys are saying, but we're looking at a network effect right now in Uber, and it's not working.
Can you name other companies besides Uber?
So remember, it's not working in terms of financials. If there's a network effect with the blockchain, I absolutely agree with you. That's working. But on the financial side of Bitcoin, I don't see how this network effect of Bitcoin, or the fact that blockchain is networked, I don't see how that establishes defensible value in a Bitcoin. And that's all I'm saying.
What do you think could it replace the fiat currency? Like, what is its biggest weakness?
Well, you'd have to have, maybe there would be one company. Because I don't know. I mean, again, the United States is only 250 years old. that was established to issue a uniform currency. Venezuela's decimated, right? They're
So,
has no
I have a
fight.
question for you. If Venezuela was to kind of rebuild using Bitcoin as like their reserve currency, and that proved to work, would that give Bitcoin the value that you think would need, that where it could flourish around the world?
I bet. I love the concept. I'm no economic, I'm no global expert in this kind of stuff. I bet that they would open up their own Venezuela crypto
Currency,
right?
And they would call it Venezuela currency,
Right. I think
instead of Bitcoin,
right.
because they can control it.
Simply because there's no limit to how many cryptocurrencies there can be. There could be the Oz and the WIT crypto. We could call it OzWIT, right?
So then,
and that's exactly why the network effect is so powerful. I mean, the fact that you can issue all these currencies, anybody can issue currency. It's hard to get over the fact that hundreds of thousands of people have adopted Bitcoin.
I think there's no debate that if Bitcoin was not the first one, it would not be nowhere near its price. There's absolutely nothing special about Bitcoin. Bitcoin was simply the first one to come out, and when people certainly saw it, they said, wow, this is pretty interesting. We started putting trust into it, and now we see it at $5,000, almost $6,000. I think that's the only reason why it's at that stage. And I think until people stop trusting it, it will continue at that stage. In the same sense that people, the moment everybody comes into agreement that, hey, we shouldn't use gold as something, as a currency, let's say, people will dispose gold and gold will lose value. In the same sense that oil, once energy comes in, once we start harvesting the sun everywhere and oil price dips. I mean,
but remember, before even I was born, there was no interest in gold because the United States removed our monetary unit of value, the dollar, and we moved it off the gold standard.
But before you were born, it was. But like before you were born, that was the case.
Right.
Like none of us were born either, but like that was the case at a certain point in time.
And then gold became re-established as sort of a flight to quality. But today still, I don't believe that the United States dollar is pegged against gold.
Well, like, how long were we on the gold standard?
I don't know. I mean,
if it was a significant amount of time, that's still, like, say Bitcoin was to go through the same cycle and it becomes the adopted standard and then it ends up getting removed, that could just be the same thing as gold. It would just take a couple, maybe 100 years. I don't know how long we were on the gold standard. Plus, other countries and cultures were using gold not the same way the United States was. They were using it literally as a mode of transfer and value, not a backing for a fiat currency.
But now most countries will back their currencies in US dollars.
Yeah.
Right, which is why when it was gold, that was the reserve. But if it was Bitcoin, then that would be the reserve. So it could just go through the same cycle.
The only thing that I like the
Google's petrol dollar.
what trips me up is that we could have 25 different cryptocurrencies.
And they could all, and the best one would win. No, right. I mean, I think that really is like a good example of that. Bitcoin is not the best. There are other very good.
Okay, so this is why the crypto challenge appeals to me, because I'd love to see after the fact if whoever's willing to just say, and this is what I traded in. I thought that the Paris Hilton crypto was just, she was rocking it, and I just took a flyer on it. Well, what was your rationale? I don't know. I'm a big Paris Hilton fan. I mean, you're just kind of wondering. And that's part of where I think we're going to learn, because we are absolutely living history in a bubble that is going to burst. And it might burst for the wrong reasons, but just like the bubble behind Uber is going to burst. It's set up for it.
It's not sustainable in the long term.
And there's going to be some major losses.
So do you think
Mike
this is
Novogratz is not going to be a
sustainable?
loser. He's a dude who is a billionaire for a reason.
Wait, do you not think cryptocurrencies are not sustainable in the long term?
That what?
Do you not think they are sustainable, or are you just like?
Well, I don't know what makes them sustainable. That's all. That's why I like the challenge, because I think we are going to learn individually and collectively teach each other how and why we had, whatever. So the board is going to give us an agreement, and then we're going to execute the agreement. Remember, you have my email address. I have the money right in my bag with me. So maybe we should go party in Midtown. I got $1,500. And, make it rain. And, I'll give you the money. I just think